In the 90s, early 2000s, rollerblading was absolutely massive and was the fastest growing sport on the planet.
Oh my goodness, well over 10 feet high.
It was in films, television, video games. It was the reason the X Games even started, and it was everywhere.
The Staples Center is going ballistic.
On any given day during the 90s, millions of people across the world were strapping up their skates for a roll around. It was hard to avoid. I mean, there was 29.1 million people doing it. You could safely say it was mainstream. But after 10 years of flying high, it became the victim of its own success and took a huge dip. Now, there's many reasons why this happened, which will inevitably come up. But in today's video, I'm going to focus on why rollerblading isn't mainstream. All the stunts are performed by professionals. Do not attempt this yourself. Before we get tucked into it, if you want to support me, you can give us a like. You can become a member of this channel for $2.99 a month. I've also got merch and a Patreon with exclusive videos. Cheers! Let's kick things off with culture, the lifestyle and everything that surrounds the skating, in particular fashion. Rollerblading was still in its infancy when it shot to the top, so it hadn't developed a strong culture of its own for people to buy into. Despite this, Senate managed to tap straight into youth culture with some provocative marketing that gave the outside world a brand and image for rollerblading. But then skateboarding took a monumental dump on it, and it was soon seen as an uncool copy of their culture, and rollerblading had little history to fall back onto. Since then, rollerblading culture has grown, but not really spread beyond rollerblading, bar collaborations with Braindead, Weekend Skateboards, Clark Shoes, and the odd appearance in Vogue magazine. Whereas skateboarding culture can be seen absolutely everywhere. How often do you see people wearing Thrasher, Supreme and Palace? It's not because they skateboard, it's because skate fashion is mainstream fashion.
I don't even know what this is.
So how much did you spend?
Only 400 today, chill day.
You'd struggle to find anybody randomly wearing a rollerblade brand, or even be able to name one. You bowl into the cat and custard pot, and there's Flute Sergeant Steve clad in basement. Highly unlikely. It's worth noting the names of these successful brands. None of them say skateboarding. Look at Nike. What sport is a Nike? They started with running shoes, but they're not called running tick. I feel like there's a few rollerblading brands that pigeonhole themselves. They feel like the community won't buy into it unless they scream, "This is a rollerblading brand." Beyond fashion, when it comes to personalities, again, you'd struggle to find somebody who could name you a famous rollerblader, but everybody seems to know Tony Hawk as if it's part of the school syllabus.
Hey, do a kickflip!
Rollerblading has very few people that transcended the sport. People may recognise names like Arlo Eisenberg and John Julio from the 90s, and Ty Chris is pretty big in France. More recently, Chris Haffey via Nitro Circus, but there are no big personalities that have really gone beyond rollerblading. I'd say our Tony Hawk was John Julio, but I mean, can we even agree on that? As you may have noted, it's going to be pretty hard to escape comparison to skateboarding, as that's the biggest extreme sport, and at one point you were either a rollerblader or a skateboarder. But skateboarding became massive, and it wasn't to do with the tricks, but more so its lifestyle and rich culture that the mainstream had bought into. Skateboarding has plenty of documentaries telling its history of their culture and countless TV shows. Rollerblading has found itself in the media too, but things like MTV Scarred showing gruesome injuries, hardly what you need. One place skateboarding really accelerated was Jackass. Although it wasn't the main feature, it was seamlessly part of it. It wasn't even about being a good skater, it was just the culture surrounding it. It was more about being just a skater.
I was just trying to make rad skate videos, and I was okay at skateboarding, but even back then I knew the best footage was of me slamming.
More examples similar to this can be found in skateboarding through people like Rodney Mullen and Lance Mountain. They weren't doing pranks or acting the goat, but they offered variety and expanded their culture. Rodney came from freestyle and a flatland background into street skating and is credited with inventing a ruck of tricks. It's important to note these were low risk tricks, highly technical but low risk. He wasn't throwing himself down stair sets or doing huge rails. And then there's Lance Mountain. I mean, he wasn't even that good, but he could cruise around and make it look cool. And that's a very key point because it's more relatable and appealing. Not everybody's signing up to be a stuntman. They were offering more ways to get involved and enjoy yourself. So the rollerblading itself is not so much the issue. but it has been on a journey, and I think it's in a much better place now to base everything off. In the 90s, when it was launched into fame, it was discovering itself and it was raw. For the majority of the 2000s and into the 2010s, blading seemed hell-bent on proving that it could do bigger gaps, longer rails, and more outrageously dangerous stunts than any other extreme sport. We really did exceed ourselves in that category. That's a tick. This approach highlighted the potential for amplitude, which was really exciting to watch somebody else do it, but could also be looked at as like an action movie that was just explosion after explosion, sometimes turning into a bit of a horror show as well. I'm not asking for a rom-com here, but just give me a little bit of plot. Give me a bit of story to actually get a hold of. As thrilling as it was one-dimensional, not that relatable, and often overshadowed more creative and stylish skating from the time. Sponsorships and brands leaving, alongside less TV exposure, meant people were less incentivized to do higher risk tricks. The one assumed track to notoriety wasn't working, but this opened rollerblading up, allowing other styles to shine through. Right now, rollerblading is much broader. There is more avenues to get involved with it, so ultimately it makes it more relatable. So we have this amazing sport that has something for everyone, and I think it actually places us better than we were in the 90s. But to develop a culture, you need more than just good rollerbladers. You need artists, you need content creators, you need clothing designers who can create and show the lifestyle of rollerblading in an appealing way. Skateboarding has massively